This morning I want to talk about the Prodigal Son. It's a famous passage over in the book of Luke's Gospel account. And to give us a little bit of background on what's going on in this particular chapter, you really need to go back to chapter 9. That's where Jesus is going to be starting his ministry when he's going back to Jerusalem. Before he does that, over in chapter 9, he sends out his disciples and they are told to go start preaching the gospel, proclaiming the kingdom. And then Jesus goes and he goes up on the Mount of Transfiguration. He's transfigured over in verse 28 in chapter 9. And then finally, when he comes down off of the mountain, we're told over in verse 51 that when the days were coming to a close for him to be taken up, he determined to journey to Jerusalem. So his disciples are proclaiming the gospel. They've gone out before him. He's been transfigured. Now he's set his face towards Jerusalem, and he's going town by town to Jerusalem and proclaiming the gospel. He's teaching the people. He's preparing them for the coming kingdom. And the remarkable thing in all this is Jesus welcomes everybody. He doesn't care who you are. He doesn't care what you've done in your life. He welcomes tax collectors. He welcomes all sorts of sinners. And he doesn't turn anyone away. And some people didn't like this very much. If you go over to chapter 15, we read there, chapter 15, verse 1, all the tax collectors and sinners were approaching to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes are complaining, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. If you go back through the other chapters, Jesus would go to banquets thrown by tax collectors. And he'd turn around and he'd go to a banquet thrown by one of the highest and most respected of the religious authorities, the Pharisees. And the religious authorities were complaining. These aren't good people you're around. You shouldn't be welcoming these kind of people. These people are sinners. You need to be around the good people like us. And we're told that Jesus told these next 3 parables in response to that particular attitude. He goes on and he talks in verse 3. He gives a very short parable there about a man who was a shepherd and he had 100 sheep, and one of them wandered off, and he left the 99 sheep and he went and searched for the lost one till he found it. He found it. He puts it on his shoulders. He comes back. He's rejoicing. He tells people to come. We're going to celebrate because I found my lost sheep. And Jesus said that is what happens in heaven when one of these sinners turns back to God. And then he says there was this woman that had 10 silver coins, and she lost one of them, and she swept and went through her entire house till she found that lost coin, called her friends and said, come, we got to celebrate. I found the lost coin. And then he comes to the one that we want to talk about this morning, the parable of the prodigal son. Prodigal means wasteful. This is the parable about the son who wasted all his possessions in just sinful living. But if you ever read through the parable, you know it's really about 2 sons. We talk about the prodigal son, the wasteful son, but we also know when we're reading through here, we are also talking about the other son that wasn't the wasteful son, but he was also somebody that we're going to be talking about. But before we get into that, I want to take a detour, and you're going to have to tolerate a little bit here. I want to talk about Rembrandt. I know that's quite a little flex there, but I think you're going to enjoy this a little bit. Let's talk about Rembrandt. Rembrandt was a painter who was born in 1609 or 1606. And that wasn't the first one I wanted to show. Where was the other one? There we are, Rembrandt. He loved self-portraits, by the way. And it's nice to know that even back in the 1700s, people were still taking selfies back then, and he did the same thing here. He loved self-portraits. You're going to see a lot of self-portraits by Rembrandt. But when he was in his 20s, he was already well on the way to a very profitable career. He had been discovered by some nobles, some royalty, very wealthy people who loved his works. He went to the capital city of Amsterdam. He set up a studio there. He started taking students, and he was doing great. People were commissioning works. He was selling all sorts of artwork, and he got married, and he took out a big loan, and he bought a big house in the best part of town, and they were having parties and they were celebrating. And at this particular point, Rembrandt is going to paint his first painting that he did from the story of the prodigal son. He did lots of other religious paintings. About a third of his paintings have a religious theme to them. But this is the first one that going the wrong way. First one that he did from the story of the Prodigal Son. This was at the height of his career when he's popular, and this is a self-portrait. That is Rembrandt. He's there as the Prodigal Son. A little bit drunk looking. He's got a ridiculously large glass of beer there. He is celebrating, and that is his wife Saskia on his lap right there. So that's a self-portrait of Rembrandt and his wife. And like I said, he's got that big glass of beer there. Down at the bottom, you can see he's got the nobleman's sword. This is the young prince gone pub hopping, bar hopping. This was Rembrandt at the height of his career. He was popular. He had money. Everything was going good. His wife and him were popular. They went to all sorts of parties. Life's good. He's popular. His paintings are selling. He's in this beautiful house in the best part of the town. You've got to admire someone. He's obviously having a great time. But you know, the thing is, when you're popular and when things are going great, things aren't always popular and things aren't going great. And unfortunately, things started not going great in his life. His first 3 children died when they weren't even a month old. But his 4th child, Titus, was going to survive into adulthood. But the next year, his wife Saskia died, 1 year after the 4th baby was born. So it was just him and Titus. And he adored Titus, and his son Titus loved his father. But he wasn't as popular as he used to be. The thing with being popular and being fashionable is popularity and fashion changes, and there were newer painters that were coming on the scene that started to be more popular. And Rembrandt was so last year. He was still selling some paintings, but it wasn't the way he was before. And that big, beautiful house that he'd taken out that big loan for, he couldn't afford it anymore. His house got foreclosed on. His artwork that he had collected for his own personal collection, he had to auction that off to pay for his debts. He still had to pay on that loan, even though he had the house got foreclosed on. He just had so many debts, and his son Titus was doing everything he could to help his dad out. He was trying to get his dad's debts taken care of. He moved him into a much more modest house. He was doing everything he could to help his dad out and get the affairs straightened out so his dad would be safe for the future. And then in 1668, at the age of 27, Titus died. And it was just Rembrandt. Didn't have anyone else. And then 1 year later, Rembrandt died the next year. And when they were going through his house and going through his possessions, they found his last painting. He went back to the Prodigal Son for his last painting, The Return of the Prodigal Son. This was a painting of a man who had lost everything and had lost his son. He painted it some time in that span after Titus died and before he died. People, when they found this painting, were very conflicted. People had painted Prodigal Son's Return before, but nobody had ever painted like this. Let me show you one that's somewhat a contemporary of Rembrandt did. This was a contemporary of Rembrandt, painted the same scene, but it's very different looking, isn't it? We got the servants bringing the new clothes. That one has a ring for his finger. Even the dog is happy to see him. It's a very bright, it's a much more cheerful one. It's this son come back. But that's not how Rembrandt really painted it. If you ever studied art or photography, you probably studied Rembrandt lighting, where one side of the face is lit up and the other one isn't, and the background's usually very dark. You see a lot of it here. This painting really focuses on the 3 individuals in the story, the prodigal son, the father, and then you see also the elder brother. So we got the elder brother there. Maybe that's mom in the background. Don't know who that's supposed to be, but it's really focused on those 3 individuals. And notice also the little close-up here of the prodigal son. It's got one sandals completely fallen off his foot. His foot's kind of scuffed up looking. The other one's about to fall off. His clothes are dirty, ragged, and he doesn't have the nobleman's sword, but he's got a knife there. And notice his head's even shaved. I assume to get rid of lice that he's picked up somewhere in it. And the hands are really interesting. Notice his right hand there. very big, broad, masculine, strong looking. And then the one there on his left hand, much more delicate. It's just pulling the son into his robes. And the son isn't even looking at his father. He's got his face just buried in his father's robes there, just like he's breathing in his father. And the father's just embracing him, pulling him in. And you also had the father just looking down at him, pulling him in there, going, it's okay. You're home now. You're safe. But then you have the older brother just looking on there. He's not frowning. He's not scowling. To me, he just sort of looks like, that's an interesting bug there on the ground. He's not feeling anything in this particular moment. That's Rembrandt's Prodigal Son. Painting of a man that just wanted his son back again. So let's keep this particular painting in mind when the story, the Prodigal Son, as we're going through the story of the Prodigal Son, because Rembrandt, I think, at the end of his life, really understand that parable more than a lot of us probably do. So let's go back to this particular story. Jesus tells it. You've got the scribes, the Pharisees, they're frowning, they're disgusted by this idea that you've got these people coming into the kingdom. Jesus is welcoming all sorts of sinners. And he's told those first two stories, but now he's going to tell the one that everyone really thinks a great deal about. There was a man who had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate I have coming. So he distributed the assets to them. I don't know what it was like back then. I don't imagine it was something that happened very often. But I know even in our own particular time, this is just an absolutely shocking thing to hear of a child saying to his parents. He's basically saying to his dad, Dad, I'm tired of waiting for you to die. I want my money now. Whatever it is I've got coming, I want it now. Traditionally, the older brother would get 2/3 of the estate. The younger brother would get 1/3. He says, I want my 1/3 of the estate right now. We don't read anything about the father trying to dissuade him, tell him it's a terrible idea, don't do this, what do we need to do to make you happier here? Don't read anything like that. We just read that he agreed to it, and he gave the son the 1/3 of his estate, and he gave the other son the 2/3 of the estate, and we're told that not many days later, the younger son gathered together all he had and traveled to a distant country. Why did he travel to a distant country? All your friends, family, they're all right here in this particular area. Why is it you want to go somewhere far, far away? Why do college kids go to Daytona, Florida for spring break? There's places a whole lot closer. Why do people like to wait until it's dark to go out and do their partying and things like that? We like the idea that we can go somewhere where nobody knows us. It's just all strangers. We're all strangers here, and we can do whatever we want, and then we can go back to our normal lives where people know us. We don't have to worry about our parents finding out what we did. We don't have to worry about the neighbors knowing what's going on. We go into that far country. We can live the life we want to live without worrying about shame. That's really what it all really comes back down to. Satan offers us this thing that we look at and it's desirable to us and we want it, and he says you can be powerful and you can be like God if you do this. And then we find out that what we're filled with isn't pride, it's shame for what we've been doing. At least it's a shame off in a far distant country. So he leaves everybody he knows. He leaves his family. He leaves his friends. He leaves any security and safety that he's got, because he has this idea that I've got money now. I don't need my family. I don't need my friends. I don't need any of the security. I've got that money. You remember back when you got your first big paycheck? You looked at that number and you thought, oh, I've got so much money. You buy your car, you buy the clothes, you buy all that stuff, and then you look at it and go, where did it all go? That's what he discovers. He goes to this far distant country to do the things he's always wanted to do, and he squanders his estate in foolish living. That's where the word prodigal is coming from. That's why he's a prodigal son. And after he's spent everything, the worst possible thing can happen. Famine in his country. It's a word we don't use. We don't really talk about famines. We just hear about famines in other places. Famine isn't just going hungry. Famine is people are starving to death. there's not enough for anybody to eat. So the ones who have the money, they get the food. The ones who don't have the money, they starve to death. And his situation is even worse than other people's. He was a foreigner. He was an alien. When things get tough, people pull together into the families and clans, and if you don't have family, you don't have clan, and you're not a citizen of that country, why are they going to waste food on you when their own citizens are going hungry? But what about all the friends he made? He didn't have any friends. His friends he had left behind. He had people that he had parties with, but as soon as the money was gone, they were gone. They weren't answering his messages. They weren't answering the door. They weren't acknowledging him. They had nothing to spare for them because they needed everything they had for themselves. So after he lost everything, he found that he had lost everything. He had nothing. He was in a far distant country, and he was a nobody. Nobody was going to give him anything. So he went out. He went to work for one of the citizens in the country. He found someone that was a citizen. And he sent him in the fields to feed his pigs. Now, I remember Jesus talking to a Jewish audience. To them, there was nothing more filthy, more disgusting than pigs. And here is this young nobleman whose job is to take care of the most unclean animal there ever was. And it says he longed to eat his fill from the pods that the pigs were eating, but nobody would give him anything. Some people I was listening to some other talks on this, and I was surprised. Some people really made a mistake here. They were talking about he was eating the pig slop. No, he was not eating the pig slop. He wasn't eating anything. He discovered he was less than a pig. He had nothing to eat. The pigs were eating better than he was. This man that had employed him, I don't know what he was paying him, but he wasn't even giving him enough money to get anything to eat, and he didn't care whether this young man lived or died. He wasn't going to give him any food. The pigs were eating better than he was. He wished he could eat as good as a pig was eating. He was less than a pig. And that's when we're told he came to his senses. That's something all of us had at some point in our life if we become Christians. At some point in our life, we came to our senses. We looked at the situation and we were in, and we realized we had gone in a far distant country and we didn't have anything. And all those things that we thought were so great, they just feel a little shame now. He came to his senses. He looked at the life he was living now, and he looked back on the life that he used to have, and he realized, my father wasn't enslaving me. He was caring for me. My friends and my family, they weren't trying to keep me down. They cared about me. Here I am in a country. I have nothing. I am nothing. I'm starving to death. And he thought, my dad, he always made sure the people that worked for him had enough to eat. More than enough to eat. And resolved, and he understood what he needed to do. He couldn't go back and say, Dad, take me back, I'm your son. He'd given that all up. When he had gone to his father and said, give me my share of the estate, he was saying, I'm no longer a part of this family. I do not want to be a part of this family. I don't need you anymore. And it wasn't going any back on that. But he thought, I can at least maybe get a job. My dad will let me be a servant just like another servant, and I'll at least have enough to eat there. So he said, I'll go to my father. I'll get up and I'll go to my father, and I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven, and in your sight I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and he went to his father. But when the son was still a long ways off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. His father standing outside his door. His son had gone off in that direction. He didn't know he was alive or dead. There was no communicating. He had just gone and disappeared. There was famine, hunger, starvation around the world at the time. He didn't know if his son was alive or dead. No word, because he'd gone off in the far country. Nobody knew him where he was. He couldn't ask anyone to check on him. And so he was looking in the direction his son had gone off, and he was waiting for him and looking, and here comes somebody. And even from a far off distance, he could recognize the shape and the way he moved, and he recognized that was his son. And what do you feel in a situation like that? His son had done so much that hurt him. His son had rejected him on such a basic level, rejecting him just as even his parent. We're told he was filled with compassion when he saw his son. And he ran off to greet him. Here's this person who was the master of the estate, someone wealthy with great dignity, just pulling up his robes and running down the hill. He didn't care what anyone thought. His son was back. So he runs to his son, embraces him, and his son goes with his speech. Father, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And his father just cuts him off. Father told the servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and then bring the fatted calf and slaughter it, and let's celebrate with the feast, because this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He's lost and he's found, so begin to celebrate. Just like all the other stories about the lost sheep, lost coin. The son come back, the lost thing is found, they celebrate. And Jesus said, that is what happened in heaven when you return to your Father. When your Father called and you answered and you came to him, that is what happened for you. Every single one of us that was celebrating in heaven when we were found, when we came back. But then we have the other son, who'd never left, who'd never demanded the estate, who'd kept all the rules, had done everything he was supposed to do as a son. We're told he was out in the field. No, he hadn't wandered off, but I think there is significance to the fact that he wasn't at home either. He was somewhere else. And when he came near to the house, he heard all the celebrating, the laughter, and the people shouting, and he called one of the servants over and asked, what's going on? Your brother is here, he told him, and your father slaughtered the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound. Now remember that picture we were looking at Rembrandt. There's the older brother just standing there, not smiling. He's not frowning, but he's not happy either. He became angry. He didn't want to go in. Remember the situation that's going on here. Jesus sent his disciples out to all of Israel, proclaiming the kingdom. Jesus is going towards Jerusalem, and he's teaching how we are to be living in this new kingdom. And you had the Pharisees and the scribes standing there looking at all these sinners going into the heaven before them, and they are not happy at all. You want to be a part of a kingdom like that? You want to be part of this celebration of going into the king's finally come? Here's the older brother, listening to all this celebrating and all the laughter and the joy. I can't be a part of this. And notice when he's talking, he never says Father in any of these words he's got going on here. He replied to his father, look. He doesn't say, look, Dad, look, Father. He says, look. I've been slaving many years for you. I've never disobeyed your orders, and yet you never gave me a goat that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your assets with prostitutes, you slaughtered the fatted calf for him. Remember, the father had divided the estate. This son had the estate. He had inherited all the inheritance, the 2/3, and he was just looking back and basically saying, you never baked any cookies for me when I was little. And I'm mad. He's been stewing about it all these years. He's been upset, just slaving for his father, even though he had the whole estate. He was the master of the estate at this point. His father reasons with him, and he says, you are my son. This other one is my son. These are my sons. He says, son, you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate and rejoice, and do not pass over that little phrase, had to there. He didn't say we should celebrate, we ought to celebrate. He said we had to celebrate. There was no choice. This is the only thing that you can do in this situation, is to celebrate and rejoice. He said there was nothing else to do. There was no other option. We had to celebrate your son coming back, because he was lost, he's found, he was dead, he He's alive. And he says, you have the opportunity now to go in and to rejoice with your brother because he was lost, he's found, he's dead, he's alive. This is what we have to do. So now he was talking to these scribes and Pharisees who were standing outside the kingdom, disapproving of all these people going in, and they didn't want to go in either. And this is where the story ends. We don't know what the older brother chose to do. We don't know what else the father did. We don't know what else the younger brother did. Jesus is extending this same question out to his audience. What are you going to do? Are you going to stand disapproving and saying, I don't want to be a part of this? I don't like these people. I'm not going to go in myself. Or are you going to say, you're right. We need to rejoice and celebrate. So when we look at this particular parable of the prodigal son, we look at these two brothers and we have the opportunity to see ourselves in them. We can look at the younger brother and we realize, yes, I was a sinner. I'm here because I was a sinner. Jesus died because I was a sinner. We can see ourselves in the prodigal son. Or maybe some of us had obeyed the gospel and then we went off into sin anyways. And we came back. No longer worthy to be called your son. But God has always welcomed us back. He's always extended his arms to embrace us and to pull him to himself and forgive us of our sins. So yes, we can see ourselves in the prodigal son. We might also see ourselves in the older brother. See some of these people who obey the church gospel and come into the church and go, ooh, he's a little iffy looking. It's not our kind of people. Let's face it, we're a white middle-class church. Do we welcome people who don't look like us, who aren't of the same level as us, who don't have the same background as us? One of the things I thought was interesting is if you think about the person who wrote Gospel according to Luke. Luke was a companion of the Apostle Paul. If you read through Paul's works, he talks about, I was a Jew of the Jews. I was Pharisee. I kept every single word. I dotted every I. I crossed every T. I persecuted the church. I was such a great Jew. He could probably very easily see himself as the older brother. And now it's not just sinners and tax collectors coming into the church, it's Gentiles coming into the church. And Paul, the Jew of the Jew, the Pharisee of Pharisees, was the one welcoming them in, bringing the gospel to those people. But there's one other person I think we need to look at in this particular story. The father. What do you think of the father? Can you really forgive everybody? There's some pretty nasty sinners out there. Can you really forgive everybody? And even if they do come to the church, shouldn't they face some consequences for what they've done? Shouldn't he have looked at his younger son and said, yes, I welcome you back, but there's going to be some punishment. You're not just going to come back. Doesn't the attitude of the father, it's almost naive to be able to think, I'm just going to welcome you back. I'm going to accept everyone back. One of the questions we have to ask ourselves as we're going through this particular parable is not just, am I like the prodigal son? Am I like the older brother? Can I be like the father? Because people were looking at Jesus and going, how can you be welcoming these people in? And Jesus is going, I welcome these people in because the Father welcomes them. Are we like our Father? Can we be as forgiving as our Father? And it also comes down to the question, why does he do this? Why did he care for Adam and Eve even after they'd sinned? Why is he nurturing a Messiah to come to save us? Why did he give his own son for our sins, even though we were enemies, even though we were sinners? When Jesus came and died for us, he still has done so much for us. Why does the Father do this? Why does he reach out and embrace us when we come to him? He loves us. He wants to be in a relationship with us. He doesn't want sin dividing us from Him anymore. He wants that barrier taken out of the way because He loves us. And that may sound naive, that may sound infantile, that may sound childish because we are also grown up and we realize we don't just forgive people when they hurt us. When they hurt us, we hurt them back. When they have done something, we just cut it off. But that is not how our Father is. He is willing to forgive us. He has done everything possible to take the barriers out of the way that are dividing us, from Him. Jesus died because He loved us and He wants us to be in the right life also. He's done everything for us. The only thing that we have to do is turn to Him and go back to our Father. Father, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And He calls the angels themselves to come and to celebrate our return. That's something, Rembrandt could understand. He had lost everything and he just wanted his son back. God just wants us to come back to Him. He doesn't want to punish us. He doesn't want to lecture us. He wants us to come back and to be His child one more time. And He's done everything to prepare that way for us. That's what Jesus was doing, walking through Jerusalem, heading towards Jerusalem, knowing what was going to happen there. He was preaching about the kingdom and He was telling people, prepare. The time's coming. Get ready for the kingdom to be a part of it. And people, the sinners were flocking into it. They were so happy they could finally be in a right relationship with God one more time. And others were saying, no, I don't want to be a part of this. So we need to ask ourselves, are we willing to go in, be a part of that kingdom? Are we willing to confess our wrongs? Are we willing to welcome all sorts of sinners even in the church, even though they're not like us? Can we be like the Father? And when people come, we welcome them into the church with the same love and care and compassion that He's shown for every one of us. That's the question for us. So when we look at a painting like this, don't just look at the prodigal son, don't just look at the older brother. Ask yourself, can I be like the Father? And reach out and embrace and welcome that lost child back. That's all I have to say this morning on this particular topic. It's something, again, that we can see ourselves in these people. We need to see ourselves like the Father, who sent His Son to this earth to proclaim the gospel message that we're able to proclaim this morning. If anyone hears the word of God, you believe it, confess of your sins, baptized, you can wash your sins away, and you be a child of God. If there's someone here that has done that, and you'd like your prayers of your brothers and sisters on your behalf, then come while we stand and while we sing.